Good afternoon and welcome to the third session of This is Film Heritage in Practice. For those who are here for the first time, my name is Giovanna Fossati. I'm the Chief Curator of iFilm Museum and a Professor of Film Heritage at the University of Amsterdam. This is Film is a collaboration between iFilm Museum, the University of Amsterdam, and the Amsterdam School for Cultural Analysis. The sessions are carried out with the master students of the This is Film class. They help introducing our guests and asking them questions. And this year's series will also be available online with a few weeks delay. And we are also trying to have a selection of the films screened during the sessions accessible on the iFilm player. This year we focus on the overarching theme, global audiovisual archiving. We chose this topic as we feel that working together towards a truly global approach to audiovisual heritage is one of the most urgent challenges for our field today. Indeed, whereas richer audiovisual archives, especially in Europe and North America, are eagerly digitizing their own national heritage, their counterparts in low and middle income countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America are just at the beginning of this process. What we see in cinemas worldwide and what we can access online is overwhelmingly dominated by American and European content. This is leading to an alarming misrepresentation of our global film heritage in our cinemas, but also and in particular in the digital space. The increasing demand for online presence of audiovisual heritage collections for researchers, from researchers, curators, and audiences in general, offers a potential opportunity to rebalance access across borders and economies, and also to promote knowledge exchange between archive professionals and researchers from different cultures and traditions. However, online presence until now has privileged the archives that had already digitized a part of their collection and had a digital infrastructure in place. This leaves us with a sense of urgency to tackle the problem and the need to support archives and colleagues across border. This sense of urgency is becoming even stronger when we are faced with tragedies, such as the recent events in Ukraine, where our colleagues at the Dovchenko National Center in Kiev, that you see here in the image, find themselves in the middle of a horrible war. At the moment, we are working together with our friends and colleagues at the Dovchenko Center to prepare a program on Ukrainian film heritage that will be presented next month here at I. Also, last summer, the international archival community united to support the Cinemateca Brasileira in Sao Paulo that suffered a fire in one of its film vaults while being completely neglected by the Brazilian administration. This crisis will be discussed also during our session today. The guests of This is Film this year are all members of the advisory board of the 7th I International Conference, which will take place here at the end of May and will focus on the same theme of global audiovisual archiving. Today, we will focus on film heritage in Brazil with our guest, Ines Aisengart Menezes. And now I would like to introduce Chenyang Zhang, Iga Romanek, and Meg Weyers, who are the students of This is Film. And Meg will introduce our guest on behalf of the group.
Yes, okay. Hi, everyone. Ines Aisengart Menezes is an audiovisual preservationist with an impressive 20 years of professional experience in Brazil's audiovisual market and cultural heritage. She earned her diploma in film studies from the UFF in Brazil. And before coming to the Netherlands and studying preservation and presentation of the moving image at the University of Amsterdam, she had worked as a curator, editor, producer, and preservationist for various audiovisual producing and archiving projects at archives, distribution companies, and film fund agencies in Brazil. After finishing her master's at the UvA, she then worked at the iFilm Museum in the years 2015 and 2016, and Cinemateca Brasileira from 2016 to 2020. In addition, between 2017 and 2021, she was the co-curator of the Audiovisual Preservation Symposium of CINEOP, the main heritage film festival in Brazil. And since February 2021, Ines has been working in the archive program at Witness, which is an international organization that promotes the use of video and technology to protect and defend human rights. Her recent research work includes an article titled Audiovisual Preservation in Brazil and Cinemateca Brasileira Crisis, the missing link in the audiovisual industry, which she will discuss extensively in a few minutes. Cinemateca Brasileira is the oldest cinema institution in Brazil and the largest archive in South America. And the institution has faced many challenges in the last decades, and in this session we will focus on the challenges for Brazilian cultural heritage practices in general, so not only on Cinemateca Brasileira. So this is a real short introduction to her work and to Ines, but she has prepared a really nice lecture, which she will tell more about herself. So we're very curious to hear what she has to say, and thank you for listening.
Hello all. I thank Giovanna Fossati for this invitation and her kind words, as well as Cheng Yang Zhang, Igor Romanek, and Meg Ryers for hosting me today, and Gertine, Tessa, Debroska, everybody in this lovely theater, as well as you watching today and later. This is film heritage and practice. Oh, I need to present, I'm sorry. Yes, we're good. This is film heritage and practice, such a powerful program to reflect on audiovisual heritage and the work of professionals. And I'm enthusiastic about being part of this year's program, along with people I greatly admire. For this presentation is overwhelming, but so is Brazil. I'm sorry for that. And as stated in the synopsis, I indicated some questions, but later I decided to focus only on the third question. That is because I tried to tackle the first two questions here in the screen in my article, Audiovisual Preservation in Brazil. And today I decided to try to avoid repeating myself in relation to the few ups and lots of downs of the Cinemateca Brasileira's past. The article to which I make reference was commissioned by Cine Limite, a New York-based organization which acts as an exciting current initiative for preserving, investigating, and screening Brazilian cinema. I addressed these two issues in No Time to Wait's last edition, where I presented these images. So a long story short, since its creation and during all of last century, the Cinemateca Brasileira essentially faced a rough period. The institution finally reached its heyday, starting with the inauguration of its current building, a former slaughterhouse, you can see in the corner up, by the end of the 90s. The inauguration was followed by a prolific period of work on audiovisual and film-related collections, access, and education programs, a story which is told by the beautiful institutional reports represented here in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. The building included a preservation lab, which 10 years ago was named by FIAF as one of the third most productive labs in the world. Then there was a 2013 crisis, which led to a 2016 fire, then the tragedy of the current government's election in 2018, followed by the 2020 flood, the ousting of the institution's entire team, the government enforced closing for a period of 6 months, and another fire in 2021. And how could such an important institution face so many setbacks? The Cinemateca Brasileira is a paramount symbol of heritage neglect, which is evident in how crisis serves as its default mode. And we have many other institutions in similar conditions. Brazil has a few national heritage policies, but none of them are related to the audiovisual field. The Brazil research and preservationist Fabiana Ferreira synthesized these issues as the only stable aspect in the public policies for audiovisual preservation is its inconstancy, a succession of disagreements and disarticulations by the political agents responsible for creating and implementing policies without a real national government project that crosses mandates. And yet, in presenting the IFE Museum at the Brazilian Heritage Film Festival, Cineop, called attention to the coincidence that both the Cinemateca Brasileira and the Netherlands Film Museum completed 75 years of existence in 2021, and that the situation of the two institutions could not be more disparate. And for this anniversary, an activist group projected these images in São Paulo, and that was it. We could start with the beginning of cinema, when film production in Brazil was highly prolific. Unfortunately, however, we have very little left from that time because of destruction mostly by fire, but also floods and the notorious cycles of innovations and destruction of cinema's origins. The upper part of the slide shows what was destroyed, and the bottom, some of what remains. 1910 would be the oldest reference of concern for film preservation in Brazil, as mentioned in a 1938 document regarding a film library of the National Museum. There are no other documents to verify this story. And the concern took a while to take hold, as we can see from this article in the magazine Cinearte. Initiative to found a film museum in Brazil would be received with laughter. The scenario changed decades later, as illustrated with this article by Jurandir Noronha, which contains a solid regret for the losses already noted and solid indications for the construction of a film heritage institution. People working with audiovisual heritage in Brazil were going against the tide. Paulo Emílio Salles Gomes was one of the founders of Cinemateca Brasileira, a professor, historian, political activist, and founder of film studies in Brazil. Also a regular member of FIAF Executive Committee and occasionally its vice president for a period of 15 years. He's best known outside Brazil for his extensive critical study of the French filmmaker Jean Vigo. And I pay homage to him and other predecessors, as well as to my colleagues and to future professionals. I wish that they would outnumber my generation, but I have many reasons not to believe that they will. I illustrate the hardships faced in the 70s through the names of this article from the Alex Vianney collection, housed in the Museum of Modern Art Cinemateca in Rio de Janeiro. The endangered film canes of national memory, the country that could be without history. Where is the past? And where is the past leads me to the importance of home movies, established during the last decades through research, publications, and events like this. In historiographical terms, Brazilian cinema is commonly associated with cycles, regional ones in early cinema, big studios, the new cinema, cinema novo, marginal cinema, chanchada, porno chanchada, and many more. I have a theory that most of the film heritage left is because of this compartmentalizing. Films were recognized, celebrated, and screened in groups, and maybe better preserved because of this. And we also have many, many films that do not fit in any of the boxes, that were not part of any movement and are thus more prone to disappearing. This changes when someone flags a film as important and curates a film series, such as Brazilian cinema, Shame of a Nation, which contain both classics and rarities of Brazilian cinema, some of them extremely popular. But I stress here that we don't know about many of other work, such as the prolific short film production, and I believe that most of it is lost with a few exceptions. And Brazil used to have a massive audience for Brazilian cinema, and we used to have fantastic cinema theaters, of which none are preserved, which makes this book on the right both beautiful and painful to see. And this also makes the cine centimetro, in English cine centimeter, outstanding. When MGM cinema was closed, and the metro in Portuguese means meter, some parts were bought and installed in a cinema in the countryside on a smaller scale. This story is told in the just released series Lost and Found, about 13 professionals, 6 of whom are Brazilians. The series was shot by young people and idealized by Hernani Hefner, you can see here, who was responsible for founding Brazil's first discipline in audiovisual preservation inside the cinema studies, which made many people, including myself, fall in love with audiovisual heritage and pursue a career in the field, despite its being tough in Brazil, which I believe is not for most of the PNP alumni in the global north. The PNP program was very important for me, also because I did an internship at the IFE Museum in 2005. And I'm grateful to people I worked with and from whom I've learned, and for experiencing the full potential of audiovisual heritage resulting from amazing people's work with great funding. In the first semester of PNP, I kept waiting for discussions on why to preserve heritage, which never happened. Then I realized that it's something postulated in the culture itself. It's in its tradition, public and private spaces, and going to the movies in old theaters. The first thing an audiovisual preservationist must do back home is explain or justify their work. In Brazil, even people who create audiovisual content are unaware of preservation. Of course, we can celebrate heritage in Brazil, and we have UNESCO cultural heritage sites. We have beautiful institutions, but we also have too many fires and losses due to the neglect by the state and the private sphere. This is a fire. Oh no! I'm sorry for that, guys. I thought I removed. I'm really sorry. This is the fire of the National Museum, a 200-year-old institution in Rio de Janeiro that we lost in 2018 due to a fire caused by state neglect. In one night, 92% of the museum's 20 million items were destroyed. In the case of the audiovisual field, we don't even know what we are losing. With a lack of policies, infrastructure, resources, and adequate climate, Brazil has a set recipe for deterioration. This is something to which my colleague Deborah Butrucci, director of the ABPA, Brazilian Audiovisual Preservation Association, calls attention by using the Chiaf deterioration guide from 2002. It is outdated, but it illustrates well how Brazilians struggle go beyond what the Federation and most of the visual heritage institutions from the global north even acknowledge. We also have fancy institutions, mostly related to art, and in this case also football. Brazilian billionaire investors have been doing great work of preserving and promote access to photography, literature, visual arts, and music, but less so for cinema. So they don't deal with the acetate deterioration, which is the case of people from this institution. Despite the odds with a shortage of resources, funding, and staff, they are doing incredible work for audiovisual heritage. And this slide should represent the numerous other institutions, also a reminder for decentralizing resources, and also that we should not be only worried with the Cinemateca Brasileira. Another reason for me not to talk about the Cinemateca Brasileira more extensively is because it's finally open again to the public in May, after six months of being closed. I believe that the people currently working there should be the ones telling the story and not me. At the same time, I am full of ideas which are far from reality. These are sci-fi ideas and naive fantasy to engage people, not the usual public, to occupy the Cinemateca with their own agendas and to make the Cinemateca more diverse and open space. I gathered those absurd ideas in this post. These proposals represent just an exercise of imagination, as the Cinemateca Brasileira faces every possible structural problem that happens when no one takes care of it. Molding the screens, trouble with the climatization system, funding issues, a small team, lack of chemicals for the lab, most equipment lacking maintenance, and probably several administrative issues considering the current government's frequent absurdities. Also, the need to evaluate and process materials harmed by the flood and the fire. And this sums up with old problems such as an outdated database and a lack of contacts and contracts related to materials and rights holders. Young people in love with Cinemateca are doing other things right now because Cinemateca is not a place for youngsters. The ABPA is unrepresented on the Cinemateca's council, while this same council's membership contains a representative of the city of São Paulo. This video was posted on Monday, showing how little the document film-related collection was affected by the closing. And it doesn't show how audiovisual vaults and facilities were damaged, but I believe the word chaos could be applied. We have a mess of decaying films between just a few in preservation mode, as it should be a continuous. Oh, sorry. Probably most of we have in preservation mode carries signs of ruins. This is a hint of the not so pretty picture of the third question I proposed. I will present some information about the beautiful Brazilian thinking audiovisual heritage. But sorry, we don't even know what we are losing because we don't have the data. So I'll start with what is left and which Brazilian audiovisual heritage we can celebrate, beginning with the mainstream media. Netflix is mostly about contemporary titles, some great ones. And the oldest one is from this century. The Criterion collection only has 2 Brazilian titles available, as observed by this then deleted tweet. And those titles are the ones restored by the World Cinema Project from the Film Foundation. MUBI loves Brazilian cinema with new titles periodically, but it's almost about digital board contemporary cinema. These are the 2 oldest Brazilian films available. and one of them is in video. This scenario changes a bit in a commercial streaming player in Brazil, Globoplay, with a bunch of Brazilian classics, which encompass titles acquired by Canal Brasil, a broadcast channel that shows, but also produces titles and some vital news programs about Brazilian cinema. I'm a fan of Canal Brasil, but many preservation issues related to it remain to be investigated. And SPCine look here at two platforms with less audience, but with surprising titles. And of course, we have a wider range of titles when we switch the informal, unofficial, peer-to-peer torrent platforms. In this case, 39% are defined as high-definition versions, a term with many issues which you should check. The rest are probably standard versions previously released in VHS. And why is Brazilian audiovisual heritage such a stranger to streaming platforms? Someone from Netflix recently hinted that it's hard to get the documentation fixed. It's hard to get good digital copies of the film. This tells us something about the industry. Before the current government assumed power, we used to have funding for individuals to organize film series and screening via public calls. Many of those projects created new access materials, but also preservation materials, and here are some examples. The same team made all these film series, and now the production company even holds the rights to some of the films. From the Cinemateca Brasileira, new 35mm prints and a new few digital copies made for broad circulation. Also, Programa Brasil on the left side, with programs available on DVD, and it would be a beautiful thing to be updated in the streaming platform. And BCC, which is not longer available, as the Cinematecas Brasileira on-site, which is currently under maintenance. This is a compilation of short films from institutions and audiovisual heritage projects made by ABPA. And another Cine Limite article that reflects on preservation, 14 digitization projects. And the efforts here are exemplified by the rediscovery of Jason Tavares films, a project by the author of the article itself. And I highlight this promising initiative, and I'll let you read further. We need to gather public awareness about what we are losing. And here is a 2001 article published in the special preservation edition of Contracampo, an electronic magazine, a pioneer. Probably most of the films that is discussed are helpless now, which is not the case yet for the films in this Cine Limite article, but we need to do something fast. And here are some random titles, examples of eminent loss. We don't know how many titles we are talking about. One positive side of the Netflix phenomenon is their voluminous documentary production with great use of archival images as a narrative thread, promoting the examination of historical processes. Many documentaries are Netflix originals, and we can see in some of these examples. But in Brazil, there are few similar documentaries available on the platform, and I found only these three. Of course, we have Brazilian films with beautiful uses of archival material, but I would like to draw attention to the reach of Netflix and how its catalog reinforces the inaccessibility and widespread ignorance of the Brazilian audiovisual heritage. We know that this type of production is also an index for the preservation institution, and this is not the case in Brazil, where it is often torturous to obtain archival messages. This is a note print of the Wikipedia praise of preservation of images, which told the story of Brazilian television, but mainly the loss and inaccessibility of materials from Brazilian television. Here with 3 examples. It's worth noting how much we have available on YouTube of some of the history of television, such as domestic VHS copies uploaded by users. Maybe we should crawl and preserve content from the past available on YouTube. For example, here are low quality copies of this lost television series made for kids by Flavio Migliaccio, a prolific inventor whose creations are not available and whose work serves as an emblematic and nightmarish heritage case. Oh no. I'm sorry. I call attention to this independent journalist whose collection housed at the Cinemateca Brasileira is currently endangered. His work gives a remarkable picture of the ordinary and extraordinary nightlife in streets of São Paulo. It also gives an example of a personal effort in preservation, which may have gone down the drain after his death. This slide is also a reminder about heritage created in tapes that are highly endangered now. Something that might have also gone down the drain in recent times is the Cinematecas Brasileira equipment collection. Due to the recent neglect, also the flood, and here is an exhibition held at the Cinemateca of Modern Art Museum, displaying just because. And such circumstances show we need to celebrate LUPA, University Laboratory of Audiovisual Preservation, a preservation lab housed at the Universidade Federal Fluminense, which is assembling a great collection of materials and which will take care of preserving the productions made through the University Film School. Cineop is a heritage film festival held annually in the city of Ouro Preto, UNESCO World Heritage Center, and a former mining city in the state of Minas Gerais that was built through a slave workforce, and its surroundings today are still mining place. From 2017 until last year, José Quental and I were curators of the Audiovisual Preservation Symposium. And after 2 years of online events, it's turning to an in-person event this year. And at Cineop, it was created the ABPA, which I already mentioned, during the Audiovisual Archives meeting. By the end of each edition, participants of the meeting issued the newest Ouro Preto letter, which can be seen in retrospect as a compilation of the main issues that the Brazilian audiovisual heritage field faces that year. And the ever-growing number of participants in the meeting created a BPA and then a plan for audiovisual heritage in 2016. Now back to mining, which I just mentioned. With deforestation and agribusiness, they are displacing and killing people, annihilating the fauna and the flora, as you can see in this time lapse of Amazonia from the last 3 years. More and more species are prone to disappearing, and the cities already dealing with the fast climate changes consequences. The most affected are indigenous people, and since colonial times, they have been facing genocide, which intensified a lot with the pandemic, boosted by the bloodthirsty president. Here, share a page of Land Defense Collection of Bambozilla, a platform for documentaries on human rights issues in Latin America, by people who endanger themselves in lawless corners against big corporation and blood mafias. And we have plenty of indigenous people audiovisual heritage. They were first captured by white people, then indigenous people took over video cameras, starting with the projects Vídeo nas Aldeias. But with digital, they got in total control of their own narratives. And I illustrate this with this rapper in the right corner. This image below was taken this week during a meeting protest in the capital city, while Congress is drafting bills that violate indigenous people's rights. I'm not aware of any institution preserving digital indigenous production. We can't say the marginalization of social rights is reflected in archival practice by institutions. And which other groups are marginalized? According to the organization Transgender Europe, Brazil has been in the first position in countries that kill the most trans people globally for 13 years now. Last year, Brazil have had double the killings than the second place. And probably is more since underreporting is a major issue in Brazil. So if you're curious about COVID figure, do not forget to double it. And today, I have been talking about the last century's endangered production, which was made essentially by white people, and how we are failing to preserve it. And in the case of images by people in peripheral areas, institutions are not even there. Marginalization of social rights reflected in archival practice by institutions is something Lincoln Pericles has been talking about for a while. He's a filmmaker and a grassroots advocate for archiving memories of working class people in peripheries. Below is a podcast where he spoke about this process of exclusion. It is such a slap in the face. And I call attention to other visionary people creating events and content for people living in peripheral areas. As you can see in the links of Thiago, known as Chavoso da USP, the concerts are mostly anchored in private platforms, which gives me the very bad goosebumps. The 3-to-1 backup rule, which you may know, sounds like a stab for the majority of people and institutions with so much economic inflation. This makes urgent the creation of governmental and private grants for resources to community-based archives. Also because we do not have any national mechanism to preserve digital production in an institutional level. When Cinemateca Brasileira was partially working in 2019, legal deposit materials were collected, but after evaluating, it would be just external drives and tapes on the shelves, which are probably in terrible conditions now after the closing and water infiltration in the vault. And I'll let you read this. Besides being transphobic and homophobic, Brazil is a sexist country with minor issues such as bro procreating, shadowing, and a rising rate of femicide, child abuse, sexual violence, obstetric abuse. Now goes badly with population impoverishment that we had with the pandemic. I believe we need national programs to revert that and promote women's empowerment. One of the US documentaries from the previous Netflix slide is Closure, which is such a powerful, beautiful, and heartbreaking film in which the role of audiovisual preservation is vital. As an audiovisual preservationist from Brazil, my dream would be to see a version of Disclosure about women in Brazilian cinema and TV and how this misogynist culture was reinforced by them. Also in the exclusion of women behind the cameras and how these pioneers should be national treasures. Elke Maravilha can be considered the first drag queen in Brazil. And yes, she's a woman. In television, she used to put women, gay people, and Black culture on the agenda. She was of the first women to speak openly about abortion and drug use. And she's my absolute hero, and she represents many things against the thirst of destruction. Irreverence, innovation, revolutionary, camp, provocative. She's a preacher of love, a queer symbol. And how come Elke's Maravilha's pioneer agenda and work is so unknown, even for Brazilians? I will read. Brazil is a country in ruins. One of the policies that is part of our culture is updating a colonial wound that never heals, but finds a new way to be explored and open, making people bleed and hurt. Brazil is one of the most violent, xenophobic, and hateful countries on the planet towards impoverished population. Brazil has the largest slave territory in the the largest slave territory in the Western Hemisphere, with about 5 million people enslaved from Africa. It was the country that later banned the slave trade, the last Western country to abolish it formally, the slavery formally. I said formally because the trade continues for decades in a formal way, and it even continues both in farms and cities today. Brazilian fortunes are mainly due to human trafficking. Unlike the US and South Africa, there was no official apartheid mechanism. There is no need for that. Colonization, slavery, violence, precarization of work, neglect, erasure, and poverty promoted the segregation itself. And I quote, "The process of rebuilding the Black person needs to pass through the image." This idea clashes with how much we lost and also drives us to create urgent measures to evaluate what is left and to create means of preserving contemporary production. The Brazilian Black movement has been strong in grassroots actions in art, literature, and cinema for many decades, but the discussion on audiovisual heritage, the preservation itself, is more recent. Two of the films I'll present today were part of this anthology of Black cinema by Heitor Augusto, who has been creating investigation, creating and promoting Black professionals. I chose these films because I believe they are powerful works that can promote reflections and change. And the most urgent discussion on audiovisual heritage is around Black lives and cultures in Brazil. But also, I hope the discussion will also include Brazilian Black professionals, because I believe it's part of the structural racism as having white people talking about the Black narratives. And these are some of the reference and my acknowledgements. And I thank you all for having me today. And I'm sorry for the passing 4 minutes.
Thank you, Ines. This was incredibly rich, informative overview of the situation of film heritage in Brazil. You touched upon both the institutional challenges. Well, challenges is a bit of a soft word in this context, but you also included the negligence of taking care of alternative heritage. So national institutions, and that's not typical of Brazil, but worldwide, tend to focus on the mainstream, on film productions, films that have been shown in cinemas. And but now, and I believe also because of the digital turn, we are much more aware of all the other alternative content. And in the case you pointed out, the indigenous archives and the important and the urgency of also looking into that. So I think in that sense you also showed the double crisis, the crisis at the institutional level and the crisis of taking care of non-institutional audiovisual heritage. Also, I really appreciated a lot how you pointed out what is there to be found on streaming platform. Because I must say, in my personal situation. It was especially during these 2 years of Corona lockdown, that we were all kind of locked in front of our monitors, searching for content on streaming platforms, that I realized how little is there. I knew that. I've always said that there is very little being digitally available, but then I was confronted with the reality. And you also showed how little is available on the legal platforms, let's say, and how poor is the quality of what is available on illegal platforms, which brings also to the question, okay, if something is available, it doesn't mean it's preserved, which is something that we keep saying for the past 30 years in the digital heritage, but now it's really visible for everybody, because sometimes the quality of what you can find is really much below standard. So what I don't know, there is something about what you told us and what I know about the situation in Brazil that really strikes me, because as you also mentioned, there was a time not long ago that Brazil and the Cinemateca Brasileira in particular was seen as an example worldwide. The lab there, I remember I had contact with the colleagues there in the early 2000s, long before I was the institute we know today, long before we had any kind of digital workflow. And it was an example for everybody. When I think around 2002, 2003, the complete oeuvre of Joaquim Pedro de Andrade was restored, digitally restored at highest level than anything was done, except for maybe for Hollywood studios at the time. So how can it go from being one of the leading institutions to this? And I know they are doing their best in their reopening, and I hope and we are all there to support the effort. But still, it's so scary within 20 years. And I don't know, sorry. And again, can you say something more about why you think that this is possible? Because I think today that it can happen to anybody, any archive. What do you think?
Thank you, Giovanna, for this provocation. Joaquim Pedro de Andrade restoration work was, I believe, completed in 2006. It was in 2K. And it's even relevant today. And it's something that we can also discuss in other times. And the old digital restorations, are they still relevant today? Well, most of them maybe not, depending on the period, but Joaquim Pedro de Andrade restoration certainly can. So how come? I believe that the main reason it is because of the lack of policies. That's something that there was an administrative crisis, and this was actually in a good moment. We had the Ministry of Culture, we had like a government that was working for the people, which is totally different from what we have now. And it was a crisis in 2013 because Cinemateca had many resources, and some of those programs flagged an alert in the Ministry of Culture, but instead of investigating, they just shut it down, and it was downhill since then. And that's because there was no actually a policy. And I believe it's also a problem that Cinemateca Brasileira created in this such a prolific moment, because instead of building up those policies together with the Minister of Culture, they were very much looking to its own problems and issues. And they also gave their back to other institutions. It's such a shameful thing to share about, but well, I used to go to the SNIOP event, and I remember the former director addressing to the participants at the archival meeting that, hey, the money from the government is just for the Cinemateca Brasileira, don't even try. So the problem, I believe, would be, okay, Cinemateca in the beginning of this century managed to get the funding, to get people working, managed to build the lab, but not the policies. So this could happen with any institution, yes, if they don't have like a strong policy to secure them in a way. And this didn't happen. And I believe we need to discuss the Cinemateca Brasileira, but I always need to point out that we have many other institutions in such in such trouble. So it's yeah, I think that's it. And another thing, I mentioned something about the youngsters being outside the Cinemateca, and I couldn't include a slide on that. And I wish to share. I believe one core issue in audiovisual heritage institutions is education. So it's passing over the knowledge. It's because now we have so many things. We have disinformation. We have like crisis on attention crisis, people watching double speed and everything. So we need always to have a look on the newest generation, to reflect and also to engage them in our institutions. And it's something that I don't believe it happened in those good days of the Cinemateca, because it was full of interns that became the workers, but many of them ended up doing other things. And it's something that happened with my colleagues from now as well, like from this recent period. After we were sacked in 2020 with 3 months of salary unpaid, many of them ended up doing other things. So it's absurd that we have, like, Paulo Emílio Salles Gomes, one of the founders of the Cinemateca Brasileira, also founded the cinema school in the University of São Paulo, which probably is the biggest, best one in Brazil, in the same city of São Paulo. And they don't have like a real partnership, like something that guarantees, like UFA have with I, something that you can create those channels of communication, you can engage people, you can provide the collection for research and for artistic research and scholar research. On the contrary, the collection of films produced by people from the film school are scattered in the Cinemateca. Maybe a part of it is destroyed. And I feel like mentioning this because the newest director, Maria Dora Mourão, she's a former professor from this school. And, well, of course, I'm full of hopes. And as I mentioned, I put some crazy ideas in that blog post. But this is something that is kind of a very fragile issue to be examined, this relationship. Because I don't know.
But
I
yeah,
think that
but there is, as you say, hope for a more productive collaboration between the Cinemateca and the university. In general, I must say, I think the situation here in the Netherlands, the collaboration between Eye Film Museum, but also the Institute for Sound and Vision in Hilversum with the University of Amsterdam, but also with other Dutch universities, I think it's quite exceptional. I think that even many European countries have a problem in getting the collaboration going between the film cinema studies departments at university and the archives. But also, I think what you pointed out very clearly, and I think it's something that we also discussed with Juana Suarez last week, is the lack very often in Brazil, in Latin America, but I think worldwide, of collaboration and exchange between larger institutions, national archives, and in general, institutions with a smaller archive and smaller archival initiatives. So I think you pointed out some very interesting, promising examples of those initiatives in Brazil, but I imagine that there is not really a direct dialogue with the larger institutions, is there?
no. There were some attempts to create like a network of audiovisual heritage institutions, but in the past, but it happened only 2 meetings, and they gather demands and needs to be presented for the Ministry of Culture, but nothing happened. But well, I worked at the Cinemateca Brasileira from 2016 and 2020, and we had so many problems because of the 2013 crisis that I believe it was not a possibility to actually to create those partnerships. And I was very frustrated because I couldn't see even my bosses attending FIAF conferences. So it was, they were totally shut in themselves instead of being able to have a connection, to change with other institutions. And well, there is one project that I'm very enthusiastic about, which was it was open source softwares and hardwares that were compiled to make like a temperature and humidity control. It was based on raspberries, and Cinemateca invested some time and effort on creating this, and they didn't manage to conclude the project to publish it because it was like such a special project that would make a difference to so many institutions in Brazil that cannot even access the minimum climatization tools. And I remember being at the Cinemateca and being very enthusiastic about this project. And then there was this government, and I have the sense if you have chaos inside, which is, I believe it's the case now, you cannot look outside. And as I said, Cinemateca Brasileira history is such a beautiful one, but mostly about crisis. So the amazing period that you mentioned, and that there was the 2006 FIAF Congress there, and I heard people saying it was a great one, remarkable. And I believe that's kind of the exception, and it's something that we should fight against, of course, but I don't know. I wish to state my great admiration to people who is working there, because they have so many challenges. It was closed for 16 months. They have mold in the screens. They have so many issues. They have water inside the vaults. It's so many issues that you cannot. And it's funny, the film-related documentation center, which is it's enormous. It's a great one. They are doing fine, because they were doing fine just before. They're not the audiovisual collection. So that's the thing. When you have the house organized, it's easy to talk with your neighbors, close neighbors and distant neighbors. I believe so.
Yeah. Thank you, Ines. Now I'd like to open to the audience for questions. There are a couple of questions from the students. Would you like to, Iga, would you like to?
Hi. You kind of started answering my question because I wanted to ask about the role of Brazilian government in, well, my previous question was about the Cinemateca, but if you could mention the role in all institutions caring about the preservation of archiving.
So the role of institutions, I believe we have even people inside institutions that go against the institution principles. For instance, I mentioned a lot the Modern Art Museum Cinemateca, where Hernani Hefner is now the responsible. And for many times, it was a modern art museum, the same model as MoMA Film Library, and they were not concerned about cinema at all. So this something that was built by people working there, and I feel that is something that occurs while people advocating for audiovisual preservation inside the institution sometimes even go against the institution's mission. And it's something that it's also an issue with people who create audiovisual. Of course, with digital, producers are realizing they have problems that they are addressing now, but in a general way, they are not even capable of doing so. So it's kind of audiovisual preservation. It's an outcast on Brazilian culture. So I'm not sure if I replied to.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Ines, and thank you for your talk. And I think you also already touched that a bit, but I'm wondering, because I read in your article that in Brazil, corporations and millionaire families usually also do not make investment on cultural equipment. So I'm wondering, under that circumstance, how do audiovisual archival institutions get funding in Brazil, especially now government is also not supporting either. Thank you.
I would add, they are not supporting and they're going against. So the very first thing this new government did when their term started was to cancel, cannot cancel, but they canceled the Ministry of Culture. So we had a Minister of Culture until 2018. In the very first day of this current term, there was not funding policies for culture. And we do have rich people investing in culture. I mentioned that they go for art, music, but not cinema. And I reckon a funny meeting that was like about 15 years ago, where I'm not mentioning the name because it won't make any difference, but a very rich person, a very rich institution gathered audiovisual preservationists to understand this whole issue about preserving audiovisual heritage, how it goes. And I was there, and many others gave a panorama. So we lost a lot. We have these problems. And I was very hopeful that after this meeting, he would create the conditions to have audiovisual preservation department in his own institute, which was not the case. You know, we gave all the information for him to conclude that they cannot do that because I don't know. And that's why we have so many rich institutions, but they don't deal with cinema. It's so frustrating. And yeah, it's funny. During this Cinemateca Brasileira period that we were dealing, and it's not a matter of funding, because I presented in 2018 at the International Conference Activating the Archive. I presented a graphic showing that money was not the issue, because we had this happening with audiovisual production and this happening with audiovisual preservation. So I think it's a mentality, and maybe it is connected with the colonial past, meaning we it's a country full of resources that were shipped to another place. So it's something that we cannot even recognize, we cannot even understand. That is something that we should take care of. And how many of you, now I can see you all, how many of you knew about El Que Maravilha? Oh, there is someone there. It's a Brazilian person?
Two.
Oh, okay. Two. Okay, I could only see one. Okay. And it's absurd. And I see those kids going crazy about RuPaul's Drag Race, which you may know. It's a very popular reality show about drag queen. And they don't know if they even don't know about El Que Maravilha, and we have so many issues with this misogynist culture, and we are going backwards. And I believe part of this is because we cannot even reflect about our own past, because the images are not there, you know. And
yeah, I think this is a very, very important point, definitely. Let's see if there are any more questions from the audience.
Thank you very much. Hi, Ines. Hello. Maybe as a suggestion, you could say for the people here about the great actress Marília Pera, because she said once that the very big problem in Brazil is that we don't have a cultural memory. And I think that this is a very suitable thing about what you are talking about. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Marilia Pera was also another empowered woman and a great actress. And while you can all see her in the Pichote movie, it was restored by World Cinema Project Film Foundation. And indeed, but the thing about not having, as you said, the culture, we don't have culture as a way, as it's a way of control. It's a way of not getting involved. It's a way of, I don't know. I'll leave to that. I'm sorry. I'm repeating myself.
Thank you. Let's see if there is one more question. Yeah, there's a question here, Anna.
Hi, thank you very much for your lecture and presentation. I was wondering whether you would have something to say about a comparison between Brazil and maybe your neighboring countries, because I was thinking definitely the present government has impacted very heavily this process, but maybe there is something that has to do with the area of the world in general, and if there is some, I don't know, relevant comparison to archiving and preservation in the field.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your question. Indeed, the countries in Latin America shares common issues, the violence. Well, for instance, I don't know if you are aware of, there is a dictatorship in, it's a neoliberal democracy in Colombia that works as a dictatorship. So supposedly it's a democracy, but they have many ways of controlling, killing its own people, which is absurd. And so we have common issues, the mining, the deforestation, the misogynist culture. But at the same time, I will use Mexico as an example. Mexico has a very strong sense of heritage, and their Cinemateca is one of the greatest in the world because they have, it's always full of, it's very crowded, and they have so many programs. And that's because they acknowledge they had a revolution in the beginning of last century, and people made this movement for awareness of heritage. So heritage became a value for them. This was a movement by the people. And we had many military dictatorships in Latin America. Chile, Argentina, and Brazil are among the most violent ones. And maybe because of that, we had so many issues to understand, to investigate ourselves, because we were shut down from our own culture for such a long time. But at the same time, we have institutions which are doing great in Latin America. We have in Buenos Aires, in Argentina, the Cinema Museum is, well, they have so many structural issues, but they are doing very well now. The Chile Cinemateca made their collection available in the beginning of the pandemic. This was very fast and outstanding. You could see so many titles from them. But there are so many institutions also facing hardships. And we have a group, the Klein. It's a group of institutions related to institutions in Latin America that are in the FIAF, that they talk to each other. And I can see they have done so many efforts, and I believe that institutions are becoming stronger. But I would like to address just one issue, is that we have when the institution doesn't work, we should ask ourselves, how can we deal with this heritage? And this is a very challenging issue when we think about the digital. And I mentioned that we have so much being produced and shared digitally, but they are mainly in private platforms. So that's a huge issue. And I've been investigating archival communities, community-based archives, and it's funny to see there are many even small, medium initiatives all over Latin America, but not so many in Brazil. And it's something that makes me sad, but also it's alert that something that, as I mentioned, maybe we should ask for the government for grants for community-based archives, because people are so poor now after the pandemic that they cannot even do the 3-to-1 backup rules I mentioned. So it's something that we should look at the institutions, but also which resources are available for people to actually do their own preservation. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you, Ines. I think in your answer to this last question, you touched upon two very important aspects that we want to highlight throughout this series of This Is Film. One being that there are also a lot of success stories, and you mentioned Mexico and Chile, and I think it's not the intent here to only focus on the problems and the challenges. There are many, and they are also they are there also in Europe and North America. So it's not even a global. I mean, we cannot make it a question of the so-called global south. The challenges are everywhere, but the successes are everywhere, and it's really about learning from each other and open up the discussion. So thank you for pointing at that. The other issue you mentioned about the community archives, I think it's so crucial because, again, I think with the digital, especially with the digital, archiving is not anymore the monopoly of archives or film archives. It has become something that any initiatives that records on audiovisually their activities, they are becoming an audiovisual archive in themselves. So in that sense, it is becoming so important to open up the dialogue between institutions and community-based archives. So thank you for pointing that out. I think now it's time to move on to the screening. So Ines, I want to thank you once again. So
I thank you all, and I saw some familiar faces in the audience, and I thank my former supervisor. Hey, Christian, many thanks for your supervision many years back, and thank you all for being interested in Brazilian audiovisual heritage and watching these movies today. And I wish for the PNP group a great program, and I will meet you in May in person. And thank you again, Giovanna, for this invitation and your wonderful team. Hello, Anna. Hello. Oh, it's not Anna. It's Anna?
Anna is
No.
there, yeah.
Yeah, hello, Anna. and her team and you all. And see you in May. Thank you.
Exactly.
Have a good session.
See you in May. Looking forward to that. Thank you. Bye, Ines. So before we move on to the screening, yeah, I just hope to see you back in 2 weeks' time on the 20th. We'll move to the other side of the globe, kind of, talking with Karen Chan, the director of the Asian Film Archive in Singapore, about film heritage in Southeast Asia. Enjoy the screening.